Hey, thanks for checking out the DDT Method Podcast. My name is Drew Donaldson, and if you've heard of PEMF, or pulsed electromagnetic frequency, before, then you've probably heard that it's pretty profound stuff. But most people approach it through the lens of pain management only. This is a therapy that can be leveraged for not only pain management, but for actual performance enhancement as well as health and longevity. And today I'm speaking to Andy Smith, who's the host of the PEMF Podcast, and I think you're going to learn a whole lot more than you thought was possible about PEMF. Hey, so if you're watching this podcast, you're probably super into performance enhancement. If you're super into performance enhancement, you're probably super into stuff like peptides, optimal training, optimal nutrition, and all the stuff that we talk about on this podcast every single week. Because if you're not, it's kind of a weird podcast to be watching. But nonetheless, if you're doing any of these things or deep diving into any of these things, and you're not getting your blood work done and your hormones are not optimized, I don't even know how to follow that up, because that is the foundational level of making sure that everything is working as it should be and that everything is optimized to make you the human being that you want to be. Maybe it's that you don't have a source for these things. Well, luckily, through Real Primal Health, I have a source for you to not only get your blood work done, but to optimize your hormone levels. At Real Primal Health, we'll analyze your blood work and we will put you in contact with one of our medical professionals who will work with you to optimize your hormones. Yes, that's hormone replacement therapy through telemedicine nationwide. That means anybody in the domestic United States that's watching this that needs access to blood work panels or wants access to getting their hormones optimized medically, reach out to Real Primal Health and we will take care of you. This is my company that I have personally set up with my team, and we have dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's to make sure that this is an experience for you, the biohacker, the optimization-focused individual that wants to make everything absolutely perfect. This isn't like going to your general practitioner who's going to give you outdated information, super low doses that are only going to hurt you and not do anything to benefit you. Nor is this some sort of give you whatever you need, just supply you a drugs clinic. This is a clinic that will do everything in their power to optimize you as a human being to get you to your goals faster by setting the foundation hormonally that you need to be an optimized human being. Back to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the DDT Method Podcast. Today we have another awesome episode for you that's going to give you some actionable information that you can take and incorporate directly into your training. And what's really cool is we're going to talk about something that can benefit you tenfold what you think you might be able to expect from it, because we're going to talk about PEMF, and we're going to talk all things frequency therapy actually. But when we really start breaking down how this stuff works on a cellular level, you'll start to understand how this most likely goes far beyond what you might have conceived as simply a recovery modality, something your body work guy uses, something maybe your chiropractor or doctor uses. And this is a real performance enhancing tool, both for recovery and driving that performance, both physically and mentally. And I am incredibly lucky to have Andy Smith here today, who is an expert in all things PEMF, and he's going to give you the full breakdown. But before we do that, Andy, give us a little bit of background on yourself and what kind of got you into all this and what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, and it's an honor to be here. So my name's Andy, and I started this whole journey, I think about 13 years ago now. I was working for my family business, which is a medical manufacturer. They sell products all over the globe. And I was 25 at the time, flying around, burning the candle at both ends, selling exhibitions, anything, you name it. And I developed a pain in my stomach. I was actually in Australia at the time, so you probably hear from my accent, I'm from the UK, so I was on the complete opposite ends of the world. And we were just flying home, and this pain kind of got progressively worse. And when we got back to the UK, finally I got it inspected. It was a Friday night, which is like the worst time to go to A&E in the UK. It's full of people drunk too much during the day. They gave me some really strong painkillers, and they said to me, come back on Monday and we'll have the surgeon here. We'll have a little look at what's going on. So persevered throughout the weekend. This pain got worse and worse. Finally get through to Monday, and I get to A&E, and I was in so much pain. I was sweating. I actually fainted in the waiting area. So they rushed me down. They knew it was pretty serious, and they opened me up, find out what it was. and found out that I had a massive ball of infection in my stomach, which they think, was maybe even caused by an ingrown hair, like something as simple as that. But the problem is it had got so bad that it was on the verge of sepsis. So it caused a right mess. They cleaned it up. They stitched me back up. But, and I'm eternally grateful for the situation that happened then. But then after, it was this whole catalogue of about 6 months of antibiotics and painkillers, and it was just a real spiral of medication. I was 25 years old. I wasn't used to being sick. I don't think I'd been sick in my whole life. And all of a sudden, I'm taking pills for breakfast, to navigate this health crisis that I was in. And I wasn't able to work. I was still in a lot of pain. The infection just wouldn't go. It would kind of half heal, and then it would come back, and there was another dose of antibiotics. Just this real spiral, and my mental health was just going absolutely out of control. So I kind of got to crisis point, and I spoke to my dad at the time, and he said to me, we'd been introduced to this therapy before called PEMF therapy, which stands for pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. And at the time, the guy, he was a German guy, and he was telling us about this therapy, and he was saying how good it was and what it does and how it helps everything. And it's, non-invasive, complementary. You just sit on a mat basically and you turn it on. And he said, why don't you put this guy's money where his mouth is and contact this German guy and buy a device, get it over here in the UK, test it out and see if it's any good. So we got this device imported. It took us a long time. Customs didn't know what it was. They were looking at this package of this mat with these copper coils and all this sort of it was quite heavy. It was bulky. This is 13 years ago now. And, eventually we got this thing in. And it's literally like a gym mat, you can imagine, plugged into this console. You plug that into the wall. You choose a frequency, you choose an intensity, and away you go. And you sit on this mat. And what it does is it creates a magnetic field around the body. And at these intensities, you can't feel anything. So, at the time, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I've just spent £3,000 on this, or $4,000 or $5,000 on this thing, and I have absolutely no idea if it's going to do anything or it's going to help. And I've just turned it on and I can't even feel anything. So I'm thinking, what is this technology? So I started taking a deeper dive. But in the meantime, I'm using this mat twice a day, and it was literally incredible. Within a week, the infection had cleared up. So I'm like, okay, maybe it was coincidence. I've just taken another dose of antibiotics. It might have just, happened coincidingly with this, with this new medication. 2 weeks on, and the scar is healed. It's sealed over. It looks like it's a 10-year-old scar. And I'm thinking, okay, there's definitely something in this. So I went back to see my surgeon, and they said to me, he said, what have you done differently? You look like a completely different person. You feel a lot more upbeat. You're walking around. It's, very different. So I said to him, I've got this device in from Germany. It's pulsed electromagnetic fields. And, the minute you say magnets and pulsing and all that sort of thing, people, especially in the medical industry, they just tend to switch off. And he said, great, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. But, we're not interested. We've got protocols to follow. And that moment for me was a real turning point, because, I had found something for me that had made a profound difference. And, within a month I was back working. I was back to my old self, and that experience just completely blew my mind. So I decided at that point to leave the family business, and on good terms. We're still actually connected to the same building, and I set up this company called NewMed, which my mission at the time was to set up a business that allows PEMF devices to come into the UK a lot easier. I stock them here. I'll make it easier for UK customers to get this technology. And we're just finding that, the education side of it is the biggest problem. Every sale for us is educating people on what the technology is doing, how it helps. When people buy one, they have the same experience to me, blown away. It's helped them get over a healing crisis, or maybe it's just help them push that extra rep in the gym, or get that extra 1%. So that was where the story began for me. And during the process, we used to import multiple different manufacturers to the UK and sell them all here. And we were finding that every device kind of had its flaw. It was a bit bulky. It was hard to use. You had to be an expert to be able to use this product. And so we, using the medical manufacturers of my dad's company, we created a product called Cellular, which is like an easy to use PEMF device, which is fully portable. It's easy to use. It's, it looks good. It's just designed to the way that PEMF should be designed. And really now my mission is to continue this like passion of educating people on PEMF and what it does and how it helps people. But to just get this other brand out there and to make it a lot more globally recognized. If I could, I'd have one of these devices in every home, because we'll come to it as to what it does, how it helps, and how it replicates like grounding, or a lot of people call it grounding on steroids. So it's like it's a lot of people know what grounding is. They understand it. You take your shoes off, you put your feet on the grass, and all of a sudden you're grounding. But it's always been quite hippie and quite like misunderstood. 15 years ago, me would see someone walking out on the grass with their feet, and I'm thinking, this guy's crazy. Like, put some shoes on. What are you doing? But people are understanding it now. It's becoming a bit more. We're understanding the technology and the science behind grounding and what that does to the cells in the body. And PEMF therapy, we try and move it a little bit away from grounding, because at the end of the day, grounding you can do, it's free, you can go outside, and we encourage people to do that. You have to connect yourself back to nature before you look at the different types of technology that are out there. Same with red light. You want to be connecting yourself back to the earth, the sun, getting first light, resetting circadian rhythm, all before you get a red light device. Then you can accelerate the benefits with the technology. But the benefits to the cells of grounding is a similar benefit to you get with PEMF therapy. And I live in the UK. The US has many different climates. So you've got cold climates, you've got warm climates, but I very much, especially in the winter months, we're moving into November now, and it's pretty cold here. There's pretty much zero time for me to go outside, take my shoes off, especially in the mornings. We're starting to see frost on the grass now. It's just not realistic. So bringing this technology back into the home is making a lot more sense. And if we were still our ancestors living in caves and exposing ourselves to the sun every day, we wouldn't need this type of technology. But the world we live in, it's not the same anymore. We're using rubber shoes, we're driving around metal cars. I'm sitting in an office which I almost sit in 8 hours a day now, which absolutely kills me. So we have this need to connect back to nature and connect back to magnetic fields, to connect back to light, all these different things that we have to integrate. And PEMF therapy is so essential. Like, people don't realize that magnetism is an essential element. So if you don't have magnets within the life, in terms of if we weren't able to connect back to the Earth's natural magnetic field, eventually we would die. Our bodies would degenerate, and we would die. And that's what something NASA found. So PEMF technology dates all the way back to like Nikola Tesla. Like, he invented, or he really discovered, electromagnetic fields. And it wasn't, if it wasn't for his discovery, we wouldn't have mobile phones these days, because of the electromagnetic field in terms of communication transfer. And he was looking at these magnetic fields in the low range, which is similar to the PEMF devices you get. Where we've evolved, we've turned these EMFs into like high frequency EMFs. And it's a bit of a problem for us, because when you mention EMF, an electromagnetic field, people straight away start thinking of 5G. The things that our phones produce that we know was linked to cancer, and we use them in microwaves, we use them to heat products, all this sort of thing. When you look at a low frequency magnetic field, so we go back to the Earth produces the Schumann resonance, which is 7.8 hertz, for example. So 7.8 hertz is very slow. And what that means is like we're pulsing that frequency nearly 8 times per second. And it's a slow, natural frequency that we would connect ourselves back to Earth if we took our shoes off and walked outside. When we talk about 5G, we're talking about 5 gigahertz, which I always forget the translation, but I think it's like 60 million hertz. So it's a very, very unnatural frequency. So you don't get this from anything that you would find in nature. And these frequencies have the ability to heat things. The good explanation is when you are on a phone call for a long time. So if you're speaking to your mum for an hour, you take the phone away from your ear and it's red and it's hot. And that's because of those 5G frequencies have basically just cooked the side of your head. So it's like the difference between the high frequency and low frequency. PEMF devices typically go from 1 hertz to 100 hertz. So those are very natural, as I say, found in nature. When you look at light, it's a different thing. It goes into the light spectrum. But applying these low frequency magnetic fields to the body, we can do that in the home. We can do it for like 10 or 20 minutes, has this profound effect on the cells. And what we can see under a dark field microscope, which I've got one behind me, is we can take a little finger prick. And I did this myself. It was really eye-opener for me. So you can look at the blood under a dark field microscope and you can actually see it moving and see it like as if it would be traveling around the body. Then you apply a PEMF device and you look at the blood again. And what you'll see on a good PEMF device is that the blood would have separated. And it's a bit like those little magnets you used to get at school where you put them all together and if they're all facing the same way, they stick together. If you turn them around, they repel each other. So what you're doing with a good PEMF device or grounding is you're able to change the charge on the outside of the cell. If you do that, then it pushes the cells apart from each other. When you've got these cells traveling around the body, then they're able to carry more oxygen. They're able to get into areas of the body like smaller capillaries, all that sort of thing. And then you create this great environment in the body to heal. So people always sort of say to me, what does a PEMF device help for? And our response a lot of the time is, it's not condition specific. What we're doing is giving the body the tools to heal itself. So the body's doing all the work. It's not the PEMF device. We're just allowing that body to, allowing the cells to create an environment to heal. So we see it in a whole range of different applications. For me, I discovered PEMF therapy when I was in like a healing crisis. And a lot of our customers, unfortunately, are in the same situation. They've tried everything. They've tried conventional medicine. And they come to us, last-ditch attempt to find something that's going to help them. And, PEMF therapy a lot of the time really does. It gives them that extra little ability they need to heal. And as I mentioned before, it's like completely complementary. We always say to people, use it alongside conventional medicine. So never stop taking your medication. Your doctor's there to tell you when to reduce your medication and that sort of thing. But use a PEMF therapy alongside it. And there are so many studies. Like we mentioned NASA earlier, and I want to just come back to that because when the astronauts all started going up to space and they were going up there for a long period of time, they started to get sick and they had all different types of conditions that were coming back down to Earth with. And one of the most common sicknesses they were seeing was osteoporosis or weakening of the bones. And they were thinking, we're putting these people up in space and maybe it's the gravity, maybe it's something that's causing their bones to weaken. What they found is one of the key influencing factors for this was that they were taken away completely from the Earth's magnetic field. So they started to research PEMFs and how these magnetic fields can influence the cells to then help with bone regrowth and strengthening of the bones. And that research was the real catalyst for PEMF as we know it today, and how it started to turn into this like commercial product that people can put in their homes, put in their clinic to help people with all sorts of conditions like osteoporosis, broken bones, just overall well-being, increased energy. The way PEMF influences cells is also to help with the ATP. So it helps to recharge mitochondria, which we'll kind of come to. So got a little cell here. You've got your little bits of mitochondria in here. And as you guys probably know, and listeners of this podcast, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's like little lithium batteries that are in each cell. And to charge those mitochondria, a good way to do it is with a PEMF device. Like, how else can you get in there and charge it? So applying a PEMF to the body can help to recharge the cell and recharge the ATP within that cell, within the mitochondria. You can imagine it very similar to these like mobile phone wireless chargers now. So you've got this little pad, you put a mobile phone on it, and there's an energy transfer. And again, it's EMFs, but they're using high frequency. We're talking about low frequency, but it has the same application. You put the two together, there's this energy transfer, it recharges the cells, and then you're able to kind of function a lot better that day. And your body's able to function in terms of helping to heal, to recover from whether it's just you've put it through stress that day, or in the case of people that are like chronically sick and, they haven't really had the ability to heal themselves. But I appreciate I've covered quite a lot of things there when you just asked me to introduce myself. Okay.
Hey guys, I'm going to interrupt myself really quickly here for a second to touch on Real Primal Human. If you've ever wanted to work with me in a coaching capacity, you may have seen that I've recently closed my books for one-on-one coaching on DDT method, but I've done so in order to be able to dedicate my time to launching Real Primal Human. Real Primal Human is my coaching platform where I've established a team of some of the best coaches and biohacking experts in the world to bring you guys the best coaching that's optimized for you, for your goals, to cut out all the BS and give you everything that you need, from training information to nutrition information to PEDs, performance enhancement from a peptide level and an optimization level hormonally, to get you where you want to be in the best way possible, and to do it safely, accurately, scientifically, and most importantly, one-on-one and catered to you. If you're interested in coaching through the Real Primal Human system, click the link below. The thing that I don't want people to miss, or a couple things really, because you had a couple really profound points that you were making, and I was just kind of bullet pointing them in my head to bring them back up because you were on a roll. I really want people to understand what this technology is doing and how it's working, because this resonates with something that I always say, and I'm usually speaking through a lens of the peptide and supplement user when I say this online, just because I feel like that industry is something that people really need to realize that. But these therapies and these tools will always be better leveraged when you know literally what's going on underneath the hood, because it gives you so many more options. We're in a fitness industry that's heavily influenced by aesthetic bodybuilding type endeavors. So that vocal minority in Instagram, YouTube, social media fitness tends to have a tremendous amount of influence over people. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we have all these like crazy mad scientists in the bodybuilding world that are trying stuff that sometimes will translate into biohacking, longevity, and just performance tools for the everyday person. But this is still a world where up until recently, it was heavily reliant on things like anabolic steroids, where there is a very specific science to them and you do need to know what you're doing. But for the most part, somebody gives you a vial of something, you inject it 1, 2, or 3 times per week, you go to the gym and keep lifting weights, and then things happen, and the things happen regardless of whether or not you're a chemist, an expert, or a complete idiot. They're just kind of idiot-proof in that they do stuff. Now, that's not the best way to leverage them, obviously, for anybody from that world, but you can just do it and stuff happens. In this new realm or era of scientific, or I guess I could say cellular medicine, cellular therapies, frequency therapies, and whatnot, you can get benefits from arbitrarily just throwing in a modality or a peptide or something like that, but you're really going to leverage it best and notice the most profound changes when you put them in the right times, at the right settings, and the right way. So we need to know how this stuff works. So going back a little bit further, you mentioned that these therapies, particularly PEMF, frequency therapy, and even stuff like red light, can be used to kind of make up for what we're missing in nature, sunlight, grounding, et cetera, et cetera. While that is 1000% correct, and because of the nature of the way the world has changed and evolved, we definitely need to do that. I think a lot of people will hear that and then they'll just come up with an excuse to, but I still have time to go out in the yard. Oh, it's still, me. I live in Florida. It's a nice climate. I can go out in the sun and I don't have to pay for any of this. Yes, in a way, you can make sure you do those things and there will be benefits, but that's kind of like saying, if I want to build a lot of muscle, if I want to get like super jacked, I don't need to go eat extra protein, and I don't need a protein shake, and I don't need to prioritize chicken and steak and fish and whatever it is, because I already eat protein during the day. And, we all have some protein. There's a big difference between 50 grams of protein a day and 200 grams of protein a day. You can use these things not just to make up for what you might be missing, even though that's great, but you can use these things to supplement, because if you're a high-performance individual, if you need to be bigger, faster, stronger, smarter, more recovered, or anything than the guy next to you, it makes perfect sense to me to supplement with more of the things that help all of those processes take place, strengthen themselves, and evolve. And that brings me to my next point of trying to break the paradigm that things like PEMF are simply going to be used for somebody that has a chronic condition or pain or anything like that. Now, obviously, it's amazing for that, and we've gone over several cases. But if we look at that cellular side of things and what it's doing for ATP, my journey into this is unique in that I am genetically very lucky. I rarely get injured, like really no aches or pains. My knees, the cartilage, my patella tendons have been basically broken down to nothing because of 20 years of professional wrestling. But outside of that literal wear and tear, I don't tear muscles easy. I'm not in a lot of pain. I don't have a lot of issues. So I was never somebody seeking out pain management therapies, tools, techniques, anything like that. So I was aware, hey, PEMF is great. I have a buddy that does a lot of like high-end body work for athletes. He said, this is my favorite device. I get it. But it wasn't really something that I would have invested in otherwise until I started realizing the benefits for ATP generation and making the cells stronger and how it could enhance my performance. So upon throwing this in as a performance enhancer, not as pain management, it was profound, the differences that I saw because of that ATP. ATP is used, that's cellular energy. That's used for performing harder, better, stronger, faster. That's ATP that you use for recovery. The more energy you have to drive the processes that your body can recover through, the better you're going to recover. That's how you get bigger. That's how you get stronger. What situations have you seen where PEMF has been used for somebody that's not necessarily trying to manage a problem, but trying to push their performance?
Yeah, it's a good question. And there's quite a few things in there that I'll try and break down. So, I mean, we can start by talking about professional athletes that are using PEMF therapy now. I personally have sold a device to Cristiano Ronaldo, big footballer in the UK, who's now in Saudi. If you look at the PEMF therapy that's now being used in the NFL or any of those US leagues, it's almost like the big teams, if they don't have one now, if they don't have a device, they're almost falling behind. And it's like what you said, the ATP production of PEMF therapy device is incredible. You can even double that by adding in a red light device. So if you use a PEMF therapy and a red light device, the energy production that comes from that is absolutely insane. Just any average user will notice throughout the day. With me, 7-8 p.m. in the evening, I'm starting to crash. I'm ready for bed. But when using these devices and combining them, I'm ready to go. But using them at the right frequency will also really help in terms of sleep, energy. So, like you said, we got to connect ourselves back to nature, and these devices also need to be used in the correct way. And there's certain frequencies that the products have, and we always recommend using a much higher frequency in the morning and a much lower frequency in the evening. So, the first thing that people notice when they apply a PEMF device usually is their sleep. So, like I say, the lower end intensity devices you can't feel, but there are high intensity PEMF devices. People might be listening to this thinking, well, I've used the PEMF device and it almost kicked me out the chair. Well, they're a higher intensity device, and they're much better suited in like a professional setting where they're going to see people less often. and the lower intensity devices are pretty much better suited for the home user. So one that you're going to use every single day. And you want to kind of regulate the frequency that you're using those. Like I said, higher frequency in the morning, it's going to, if you replicate the brain states, so we're using like gamma or alpha throughout the day. So we're kind of keeping ourselves alert, giving ourselves energy. And then you want to move towards the theta and the delta range in the evening. And that's going to really wind you down and help for sleep. So like you say, there's a real wide variety of people that use these devices, but we're seeing them in so many high profile sports locker rooms, using them before activities, using them after to recover. But it's really key what you said about these products working on cellular level. And it's the big thing that we always mention with PEMF therapy. It passes directly through the body. It influences every single cell on the body. We're made up of billions of cells, and people are very often like, you'll know also well that, people will spend thousands of supplements every month. And a lot of the time they're going in blind. They're just taking all these supplements. They don't really know what for, but something I learned recently is that you can throw as many supplements down your throat as possible, or you can do all these IVs. But if the cells in the body aren't ready to receive those supplements, to receive the nutrients and everything that's coming from them, it's just going to be flushed out through the body, and it's a complete almost waste of time. Your cells have to be ready and adapted with the cell wall channels open to be able to get the nutrients in the cells and the waste materials out of the cells. And that's something that PEMF therapy does really, really effectively. So there is loads of different studies now that they've done that they're looking at cell absorption from nutrients and even medication. So when you get medication, that sometimes it's, they call it, can't remember the word now, but it's when someone's on a medication, it's just not working. It works for everybody else, but doesn't work for them. And a lot of that time, again, that's because the body's not ready to absorb it. The cells aren't healthy enough to be able to absorb those nutrients from that medication or from those minerals. So they're almost just wasted. And applying, PEMF devices is really good. It works on the cellular level, works on every single cell of the body to be able to take those nutrients in. So, people worry about the outlay of a PEMF device because it is quite expensive technology. When you think about a good PEMF device, the way that it works is you have to create, I've got one here, it's a copper ring. So, these are thick copper rings. And, our device, the Cellular device, has 12 of these across the entire mat and one in the controller. So that's a lot of copper, it costs a lot of money to produce. And so people see the PEMF devices as quite a heavy outlay to start with. But when you're seeing what the profound effects it's having on the body and every single cell in the body, it's just one outlay, and then you can use that for a lifetime. And like I mentioned, people are throwing $500, $1,000 of supplements down their throat every day. And what a lot of people tend to find is when they introduce a PEMF device or a good red light therapy device or something, you're able to influence those cells to take the nutrients in better. And suddenly those supplements start actually doing something, when they start really doing what it says on the tin, because your cells are ready to kind of absorb those and use them more efficiently.
That's literally what people need to hear, because again, we need to shift the paradigm of this is a recovery tool in terms of injury, and then start to make people realize this is a recovery tool in terms of your body's ability to do anything that you're trying to do. So since implementing PEMF into my recovery routine, and that's a recovery routine that already implements a vast amount of technology. I already had Lakofsky coils, as we talked about, which is similar but more of a broad spectrum frequency. I've been using red light therapy, infrared light therapy forever. I have an infrared sauna. I have a cold plunge. I use green light therapy a few nights a week. I have a Shakti pad, which is essentially modulates dopamine and serotonin. It's almost like acupuncture. I have a Carbogen CO2 inhaler. Like I invest a lot in my health, well-being, and longevity. It's my job. It's a write-off. Sorry, that's the fact of the matter. But B, I also am genuinely invested in this. And I was the guy that for years and years spent thousands upon thousands of dollars on supplements, peptides, etc. And don't get me wrong, I still do. I'm not trying to claim that I don't. Anybody that pays attention to my channel has seen the mini fridge behind me and all of my protocols and whatnot. Like I use a lot of stuff. But I can actually say that from where I'm sitting as an example to somebody else that might be interested or thinking like, what will this do for me? Just look at it like this. If I was doing literally everything already and then I added PEMF and I saw a profound difference in my energy, my productivity, my recovery, my strength, that means it's significantly moving the needle. So the way that I implemented it, and maybe you can come in and kind of tell me what exactly is going on or correct my use of it, is kind of as follows. Now, speaking on the other modalities, I don't do everything every day. And I think that's a big mistake with everybody that's kind of coming at it from the lens that I do, where we want to do everything as we try to do everything constantly every single day. Now, PEMF has been one of the things that I've been doing daily, and that's where I'll kind of differentiate as I go through. But daily non-negotiable for me pre-PEMF, I use my infrared sauna every single morning. I do some cardio, whether or not it's 20 minutes of steps or 40 on the Stairmaster or some HIIT cardio. I'll do that, then I'll go directly to the sauna for 20 to 40 minutes, depending on really whether or not I warmed it up first or forgot to or whatnot. And then throughout the course of the day, the other modalities are going to be kind of based on what I'm doing. If it's a not hypertrophy-based day, if I'm doing more conditioning or just recovery, I'll definitely end the day with some cold plunge. I might do a sauna again before that. If I'm really hyped up over the course of the day, I'll do some green light therapy in the day to calm down. Red light therapy is my other non-negotiable I didn't mention. That's every single morning. Like I pop into the office, I'll check some emails, I'll turn my red light panel right behind me on, and that's going to happen no matter what. I have my grounding pad in here. I ground outside as well. Those are all my daily ones. The Carbogen breathing device for CO2, that's if it's a hard workout. Everything else factors in and out based on the actual day. So when I added PEMF, I added it in 3 main places. Now I've been doing it every single morning. So with the morning setting of the device, so I've noticed that what that's been doing is that's been kind of like revving me up a little bit. That's been like my morning coffee, and it's definitely noticeable, not in a heart palpitations type of a way, but it's just kind of like shaking off any lingering brain fog from the night before. Let's say the night before I incorporated a little bit of medically prescribed THC, and it's still a little foggy in the morning when I wake up. That knocks that out 100%, gets me ready to rock and roll. Then sometimes my not everyday usage is if I'm doing isolation work, I'll actually use the device at a very high frequency directly over the body part that I'm going to be training to start stimulating some blood flow, some stem cell release and whatnot. Hitting it on my arms and then training arms is profound. Like the pump is fantastic. I just feel great. The muscle feels dense. It feels like it's firing from the first rep, which is incredible. And then in the evening, if I'm not doing cold plunge, there's no real scientific reason why I don't combine them. It's just a lot to do, and I still have other stuff to do. In the evening, if I'm not doing cold plunge, I'll use the evening setting, and that's literally the last thing I do before I go to bed at night. I'll lay there for 20 minutes. I'll hang out a little bit, drink some water. I'll usually do some hydrogen water right after, and then just go right to bed. And the sleep impact has been profound. What's going on when I do this? And like, would you change anything about it? Like, have I pieced together something that works out, or do I need to be doing things differently?
No, I mean, it sounds like you're hitting it really, really well, to be honest, especially if you're using it as frequently as 2 to 3 times a day. You know, like you mentioned the morning setting, you know, when we used all these other PEMF devices, a lot of the time you had to choose a frequency. So it's like choosing 30 hertz in the morning or choose it for different types of, you know, conditions and that sort of thing. And I really wanted to dumb the product down in terms of, you know, morning, evening. So we've got a morning mode and evening mode, meditation mode, because we know that a lot of our users would meditate on a PEMF mat, and night mode. So it couldn't be any more simple than that. And what it does is it will apply a number of different frequencies throughout those different sessions. So something that can also happen quite frequently with PEMF therapy is you get stuck to one frequency. So people will look at a study, they'll find a study, maybe on cancer. It's quite a common one for us because we get a lot of people buying the PEMF devices for cancer. And there's a big study out there that had a great response, and it used 10 hertz. So people will just like, right, I want to stick it on 10 hertz, which you can do with our device, but your body will kind of get used to it over time. It's like with anything, you introduce one therapy to, you use it exactly the same at exactly the same time of day, every single day. Your body gets used to it and it becomes less effective. And so what we do is we encourage people to use a range of frequencies, which our device will use over those different time periods. And it kind of will keep your body firing with all these different frequencies at the right time of day. But it's good that you mentioned all these other biohacks as well, because over my time, I've done all these different presentations on PEMF therapy and what people are resonating with at the moment. And the most popular one is this, like how PEMF can enhance all your other biohacks. And actually, straight after this podcast, I'm doing another presentation exactly on that. And because we see all these longevity centers, and what's the first thing that goes into a longevity center? A sauna and an ice plunge, which is great. They're good modalities. But, if you've got a space in the gym, you'll put a sauna and ice plunge in there. They don't really know why they're doing it. They'll just stick them in there, and everyone kind of understands how to use them. And, one's hot and one's cold. Great. But you can use PEMF therapy to enhance all these other biohacks. And again, it comes down to the cellular side of this, of PEMF therapy. If your cells, again, aren't ready for the cold plunge, if they're not ready for sauna, and both of those actually are stressors. So the sauna and a cold plunge is a stressor of the body. So, what people tend to do, they go to the gym in the morning and then they finish their session with a sauna and a cold plunge. And then by midday, they're wondering, like, why does it feel like I've been hit by a train? Like, because you've trained and then you've gone into two different therapies, which are great therapies, but they work by stressing your body and putting yourself in fight or flight. And then, your body takes over to do these things. PEMF therapy used before or after these different biohacks can be really, really effective for different reasons. And again, there's kind of a bit of a protocol in terms of when you would introduce these, but I'll run through a couple with you. Like if we talk about an ice plunge is very effective vasoconstriction of the blood vessels. So you jump in an ice bath and all your, everything constricts, and actually it decreases circulation quite a lot. It has that effect, and then that's where it puts your body into fight or flight. PEMF therapy after a cold plunge is really good for one, it just naturally heats the body back up because increased circulation will help to warm the body up. But two, it's really good at vasodilation. So that's opening up those blood vessels again and getting everything running back as it should. So we call it like a recharge, especially after an ice bath or a sauna. So if you've done one of those two, especially if you've done it early in the day, then, recommend using a PEMF therapy device after those two, because it's like you're stressing the body, but then you're going to give yourself this little recharge before you go back to work or before you continue with your day. When you would use PEMF therapy before, as I mentioned, like absorption of minerals and nutrients, if you're going for an IV that day, IVs are becoming really, really popular. I went to an exhibition in the US like 2 years ago, and since then it's just blown up. If you go for an IV and you walk away thinking, I'm not sure if anything's really happened, I don't feel any different, is that because you've gone in there kind of unprepared? Use a PEMF therapy device before then. You're going to separate the cells, open the cell channels, allow those nutrients in. So again, it's going to like massively increase that. One that we've also found is like a huge, like profound effect is a HBOT, hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber, for people that aren't aware. And, HBOT works by flooding the body with oxygen. And again, if you can imagine all your blood cells circling around the body, all stacked together and all coined, you're not going to allow them to carry too much oxygen. So you're going to be forcing all this oxygen on it, but they're all stuck together and they don't have a very good surface area. So again, if you put someone on a PEMF device, I've mentioned PEMF there because sometimes people call it PEMF, PEMF, then that will allow the cells to separate, carry more oxygen. put someone in a HBOT after using PEMF for 10 minutes, like, the results of that session are just massively increased. So again, HBOT isn't cheap, and we're seeing it happening. You see Gary Brecker sitting in his HBOT like every day, he's using it like, which is great, but put a PEMF device in before that, you won't need to use it every day. Once a week will be absolutely fine, because the benefits of that will just last forever. So yeah, there are protocols in terms of like where PEMF fits in. But if you're using it 3 times a day and stacking it with other therapies, I mentioned before that one of my favorite bio stack is PEMF and red light. And the reason that that's such a great mix is you can do the two together. So I would say to people, if you're dedicating 10 or 20 minutes a morning to a red light therapy device, you have to buy a PEMF device, because you can sit on it while sitting in front of the red light. So you're not adding anything to your routine. You're not adding any time. You're going to be sitting there anyway, but you're going to get this profound effect of the PEMF as well as the red light. And red light therapy is great. I love it. I use it every day. It's great for skin health. It's good for ATP and energy, but it only has a superficial level. So it'll only go to a certain depth of the body. You won't ever really get a red light device that will travel entirely through the body. It's just not how it works. But PEMF has that ability, and our device has. We've got one on calls here. From the surface of this coil, about 2 meter range. So it will go out of here and it will come back round again and up through the middle. And that magnetic field will be like a 2 meter radius. So anybody sitting within that magnetic field, the magnetic field will be passing through the body, influencing every cell of the body. So yeah, stacking red light and PEMF therapy is like a must. If you're already putting time into a red light device, same for PEMF users. If you're listening to this and you've got a PEMF device and you're not using red light, get one, and stack the two together.
Now I gotta ask, when using something as strong as PEMF, I don't think I can't be on my cell phone while I'm sitting there, correct? And do I want it further away from like other electronics? Because it's pretty profound how it works.
Yeah, so and that comes down to the strength of the device. The lower intensity, so if you get a low to medium device, they're typically the ones that you can't necessarily feel. You can sit there and use your phone, but we don't, this is your time. Do you know what I mean? This is your time to decompress. If you get breath work, my like limitless pill is PEMF therapy, red light, and breath work. That 20-minute session is just insane what you'll get from that 20 minutes. And, that will last throughout the whole day. So for that reason, put your phone down. But when we're talking about high intensity PEMF devices, yes, these are a bit of a different animal. And if you're sitting in a PEMF device, if you've tried one in a clinic or in a wellness center, or you've overpaid for one at home, because these things can be like in excess of $40,000, and it's a little bit overkill for what you need at home. You don't want to be using a mobile phone on this. And it's the same kind of 2 meter rule is what I give to people. Any electronic equipment, move that away for 2 meters. There's no known side effects of PEMF therapy in the high or low intensity, but the major contraindicator is a pacemaker. So anybody with pacemakers, whether they've got a low intensity device or a higher intensity device, is an absolute contraindicator. They can't use PEMF therapy, obviously just for the risks involved of playing around with electronic equipment within the body, that's actually regulating their heart. So, but other than that, there really is no known side effects that come from PEMF therapy, and it's really recommended to use alongside all sorts of other things. So yeah, coming back to the high intensity, you want to move it. Same with phones, same with other medical equipment within the area. You want to move that away. Magnetic strips on credit cards, it's got a real good habit of demagnetizing those. So if you want to use your credit card later that day, then take it out of your pocket and move it away. Things like Aura rings and Whoop bands and that sort of thing. Generally, it's electronic equipment. We take it off, but a lot of people keep it on, and it doesn't affect it too much.
So that's one reason I always like to point this stuff out, is just because there's always going to be somebody that's like, I don't know, I don't really feel it. Like, what's really going on? Generally speaking, if you have to, for at least caution's sake, stay away from, using your electronics on it, or if you have a pacemaker, don't use it, that at least assures people that, hey, something's actually going on here. So we definitely want to make sure that we're cognizant of those things. Now, can you give us a little bit more information on just frequency strength? Like, let's use your device as the example here. What are the differences between the frequencies? Because I know we talked about like a stronger one being energizing for the morning, a lower frequency being more calming and whatnot. What are the actual frequencies that your device uses? And what's going on underneath the hood that makes it different? Because a lot of people are going to listen to this and they're going to say like, oh, well, I either have it on really strong or I have it on like weaker. So, I'm a big, strong MFer, so I'm only going to use the strong setting all the time because that's what it's going to take for me. It's not a matter of stronger or weaker. It's a matter of what stronger or weaker, so to speak, are causing internally. Like, let's deep dive a little bit more into those differences and like what's actually happening so people can understand. Because we're going to get somebody, well, I think we'll get a few people that are going to see the importance of this and want to invest in a device. But we're going to have people within that contingent of people that are just like, I just go on the strongest setting all the time because I'm tough as all hell. Like, where are they getting that wrong?
Yeah, so just to mention, you mentioned frequency, but there's frequency and intensity, and they're the two main modalities in this. Frequency is what we mentioned before about using it higher frequencies in the morning, lower frequency in the evening. The intensity is the strength of the device. So we tend to measure that in Gauss. I measure it in Gauss. It's just an easier kind of measurement for the magnetic strength. And for example, our device, it runs from 1 to 100 Gauss. And the reason we chose that is that like 90 or over 90% of all the clinical papers are within that range of intensity. And that's what they see all of these benefits from. But the Americans, they want everything strong. It has to have a big engine, it has to purr, it has to kick you in the back. So that's where these high intensity devices come from. And to give you an example, like you won't really feel a PEMF device unless it's over 3,000 Gauss. So our device is 1 to 100 Gauss, and if you're feeling something, then you know that it's at least 3,000 Gauss and above. We have another device that we've just released to cater for this high intensity need. And one of the applicators goes up to 8,000 Gauss. So it's like a big difference between your highest intensity on the low intensity device, which is 100 Gauss, and the 8,000 Gauss, which is the applicators. And why is there such a difference? And why would we use these, and what's happening in the body? So therapeutically, what it's doing to the cells, in my understanding, is very, very little in terms of the difference between the two products. So you're still going to get the body's natural ability to heal. You're still going to get a kick of ATP and energy from the low intensity and the high intensity. And the difference between the high intensity devices, really, one of the biggest differences is that the customer can feel it. And that matters for a lot of people. Like, if you're going into a wellness center or a longevity center and you're paying $50 or $90 to sit on this product, you want it to do something. You want to feel it. Whether that helps with placebo when you've left, whether that helps with just your understanding of the product, then that's fine. And we tend to see these higher intensity devices are much better suited in these wellness centers where, we're 50 minutes or nearly an hour into this podcast now, and we're still scratching the surface of what the technology is and what it does. So the guys in these centers don't want to be explaining to a deepest level, to a cellular level, what this product's doing, but they want to put people on there. They want them to feel something. They want them to walk away feeling energized, feeling great, and knowing that session had this profound effect. And that's why we kind of find these products in those settings. When people come to me and say, should I spend $3,000 on your signature product, or, up to $20,000 on the high intensity device, which one should I use? And it's like, right, well, what are you trying to achieve? If you're using this at home, you only need to go for the $3,000 device. You don't need to go in excess and you be using this every single day. If you've got the money to, I've got both products at home because I manufacture them. I can get mates rates. I use my low intensity device every single day. That is my non-negotiable. Like, I get up every morning, I use that. I've got one in the bedroom and I use that before bed. When I turn to my high intensity one, if I've picked up an injury, then I'll probably use it a couple of times a week. And if I'm not tending something, if it's just general maintenance, then literally once a week for me is absolutely fine with that type of device. So yeah, that kind of breaks down the two different intensities and why you would go for each one and kind of where you would find them mainly.
Good, because that's one of those things where I think we really need to communicate that to people, because it's not always about like, give me the strongest one. It's going to be more about, give me the one that's going to serve the purpose that I needed to serve even better. So I'm super glad that we touched on that. Andy, before we wrap this up, I want to hit you with one more question, and this will be, without a shadow of a doubt, the most important question that I will have asked you all day. And it's something that even if the people listening aren't actively wondering right now, once I ask it, they'll probably agree with me. So PEMF, safe for dogs or no?
Yes, absolutely. So PEMF started in the animal world. It actually was much more mainstream with horses before it ever got applied to humans. And animals just have this real inert ability to kind of like gravitate towards things that really help them. And, we find that with dogs and cats. And I'll explain this. Like, we often get people that buy a PEMF device and they call us, we have this like, we got a 30-day return policy with all of our products. So, with PEMF therapy, you have to try it. You have to understand it. You have to feel the benefits. We understand that. I was just as skeptic as anybody else before. So it's like, try it. You don't feel anything and send it back. And what we do these follow-ups with people, and we say to them, how are you getting on? And, anything you've noticed. And a lot of the time we get this feedback where people say, the funny thing is, when I sit on the sofa and I put this device on, I turn it on, my dog, which was never a lap dog before, comes over and sits on my lap. And it's like, and they're sort of saying to us, is there a reason for this? And we're like, yeah, because, cats and dogs are super sensitive to electromagnetic fields. And that's why they like spending a lot of time outside. And they just tend to gravitate towards it. And they come and sit on your lap and they enjoy the benefits with you. And, for that reason, we've bought out pet and dog pet mats, with little paws on them, because dogs will benefit just as much as humans will when it comes to PEMF therapy. And, I've even had it myself. My dog we had for 16 years. He unfortunately passed away this year, but he got cancer 5 years ago and he got it on his face. We had it removed. And since then I was like, right, we're going to get him on the PEMF device. And it managed to, the vet at the time said, unfortunately, this is quite an aggressive cancer. And, although we've cut it out, we very much expect this to come back. And if you get another year out of him, you'll be lucky. And he did another 5 years, bless him. So, and I don't know what killed him in the end, if it was the old age or if it was the cancer, but, we got another 5 years out of him by applying PEMF therapy to him. So, it's just as well used, and I encourage it, to use it for animals. It's just as useful and as effective.
Awesome. I mean, that was definitely a loaded question because I do know that it's safe for dogs. But the funny thing is, for anybody watching, we didn't discuss this prior at any point in time. And I have mentioned it on Instagram a few times. So if anybody that hasn't seen that, I'll mention it again now. Literally every time that I use the pad in the evening, so I put it out on my couch, I just lay down, dim the lights, and I have incandescent bulbs anyways, so it's just a very calm and serene setting. Every single time, one of my 3 dogs, if not all 3 of them, will just pile up on the couch, and 1 or 2 of them will try to climb up on me while I'm laying down. Now, they are lap dogs. They'll do that a lot, but evening on the couch, all 3 of them together, like incredibly rare. And all three of them, either together or separately, will always want to pile up on the couch when that device is on, which is wild that you said that, just because we didn't talk about that whatsoever. So definitely something to look into for that. I've done plenty of reading because I'm a much more neurotic dog dad than I am a self-experimenting person. So when I found out that is when I found out that's actually going to be beneficial if I can learn how to talk, it was something that I was like, okay, we're just going to let this happen every single night. And there's definitely been some minor improvements, but my dogs are better biohackers than I am. I have them doing a lot of stuff. Nonetheless, Andy, this has been absolutely fantastic. And I think hopefully we opened a lot of people's minds up to what PEMF can do just outside of a pain management perspective. And for God's sake, if anybody watching this is managing any sort of chronic pain or they have any sort of injury that they're trying to get over, we almost skipped over all the profound stuff it can do for that. We didn't skip over, but we kind of glossed by it to get to the performance aspect of it. So obviously, incredibly important in that world, but I just want to keep harping back on the performance enhancing crowd. This is performance enhancement. And here's the best thing about it. You don't have to buy technology every single month because you're not running out of it. So you invest in this and you're not really spending more money at the end of the day than you are on a couple months of the supplements or peptides or whatnot. And this is something that has scientific testing behind it, NASA for God's sake. So I heavily encourage everybody to look into PEMF, maybe find somebody locally to you that's using it from a wellness center standpoint, get your feet wet with it, and then start looking into it a little bit more, because it has been one of the best things that I've added to my own modalities. And again, I don't really deal with injuries. I'm lucky. I'm not special, but I just don't get hurt a lot. For performance enhancement, both cognitively and physically, absolutely profound. Andy, if people want to dive more into this information and kind of look into what you're doing and working on, where can we find more of your stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a podcast as well, which hopefully we'll get you on at some point, and that's the PEMF podcast. And that really set up as an educational tool to understand, 'cause there's so much we can talk about with PEMF therapy. So yeah, check out the PEMF podcast. If you want to get in touch with me directly, then I'm most active on Instagram. That's Andy Smith _PEMF. And the brand that we mentioned before, which is my brand, is Cellular 8, CELLER 8.
Awesome. Andy, again, thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the DDT Method Podcast, and we'll see you next time.